I totally forgot to hit start on the video, so I started writing this problem down, but I'm going to go through and explain it. First off, I said, oh, look, there's a graph on the back. So let's go ahead and start making points for that graph from the information we found. So we know that X is always what's in parentheses, Y is always your answer. So I wrote it as an ordered pair, and then I reminded myself, this is my T, so T is hours, and my H is 14.5, and it's the height in feet. So this order pair is 1.5, comma 14.5. The 1.5 is hours. The 14.5 is feet. And then I did the same thing with our second answer. So it said height was 7. So height is our y, as you can see from up here. So I put 7 in the y. And then when we solved it, we got t equals 4. And t equals 4, t is our x. So I put 4 in place of the x, and then I just carried over the same labels. That's t or x, that's our y. T stands for hours, y stands for feet. So I already got 2 points on the graph. So then I went over here on the table and said, okay, this is my hours column because the x always goes first, and over here we said the x was t. So see how important these 3 steps are? We have used them over and over and over again. The labels, the letters, which is x, which is y. So most important steps of the whole problem are those first 3 where you write the variables and then write the equation. Kind of like what you did on the Module 5 test. Remember that word problem? So you write what the variables are, then you write your equation. And so I brought the variables over. T is hours, and it's my x. H is feet, and it's my y. So in the x column, I wrote t in hours, and in the y column, I wrote h in feet. And then I brought my 2 ordered pairs over, 1.5, 14.5, and 4 and 7. Okay. And that's just because I peeked over there and saw the graph, and I'm like, oh, I might as well start making the table, right? So then I started this one, and that's when I looked up and went, oh, the video is not going. So you need more time to copy it. Just stop the video and copy whenever you need to. So vertical intercept, I drew the vertical line and I went, oh, that's the y. So they want to know the y-intercept. And we learned last week in our videos, anytime you're trying to find the y-intercept, you make x 0. But then I look up here and go, but what's x again? Oh, x is t. So by them asking me to find the vertical intercept, they're really asking me to make t 0. So I wrote the equation that we got up here, brought it down here, and then everywhere I saw a t, I filled in 0. So h of 0 equals negative 3 times 0 plus 19. And so that became 0, so h of 0 is just 19. And then I marked my letters so I remember whatever's inside is time, time is hours, whatever I get from my answer is h, and h is height in feet. That corresponds to this ordered pair. So this is my vertical intercept, or we called it y-intercept last week. They're exactly the same thing, but remember how we learned intercepts are always points. So make sure you write it as a point. X is 0, y is 19. And then I went over here and made my order pair. T is time, height is 19, so it's after 0 hours. The height is 19 feet, but it sounds weird to say after 0 hours. So you could say before it starts melting or at the beginning. So something to that order, because see how it says Oops, my paper's slipping. Sorry, let me get this. So see how it says, what does it mean in the context of the problem? So it means after 0 hours, or a better way to say it is at the beginning, the statue was 19 feet tall. Or remember on the quiz, some people wrote, before the statue started melting, it was 19 feet tall. So any of those are okay. So lots of stuff to remember there, because this is from last week. Vertical intercept is the y. That means don't forget to make x 0. But we don't have an x in this problem. So I looked up here and saw that x was t. So that's just asking us to make t 0. Plug it in, all the places you see t. Solve it. Write it as an ordered pair, because remember this is your y-intercept. So write it as an ordered pair, and then they asked us to talk about it. So do you guys want to try the next one? I think it'd be a good time to shut off the video and try the next one, because it's the opposite of this. It's the horizontal intercept, so they want the x-intercept. So shut it off and see if you can get that on your own. Okay, so the horizontal intercept is really, the horizontal axis is just the x-axis. So they're asking us for the x-intercept, which means make y 0. So what are we using for y? We're using h. So that means, with the letters from our problem, make h of t 0. So that's our y. Because remember how this is, I'm going to make this smaller so I don't have to keep going up and down. This is y equals mx plus b. So this is what we're using in place of y, h of t. So when I know I'm finding the horizontal intercept, we learned last week horizontal is the x. We always make the other letter 0 y. So what are we using for y? H of t. So take your equation and you replace h of t, not the t. That's making x 0. This whole thing is y. So you make that 0 equals negative 3t plus 19. And even if you didn't know h of t was y, you know this is y equals mx plus b. So that's always going to be my y value. So now I have to solve this. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm kind of anal like that. I'm sorry. I like having my letter on the left. So when I'm solving this, I need to keep the t there, move everything else over. So subtract 19, subtract 19. So I get negative 3t equals negative 19. And then I divide each, because remember I'm doing the opposite. That's why I subtracted 19 to bring it over. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. And we learned in Module 5, anytime you have a double negative, make those positive. So that would be 1t, which is t equals. And when we divide, and if you don't want to do it in your head on a test, you can type it in your calculator. You can just type in 19 fraction bar 3. And there's a 6 1/3. And t is my x or my y? T is my x, and it's number of hours. So we need to write 6 1/3 hours. But this wants a horizontal intercept, and we said intercepts are always written as points. So since t is my x, that would go first. And what's my y? I look up here and go, oh, y is 0. That's why I write it. Then it's always there handy. So remember, this is hours. And my y is the height, which is feet. So I'm going to write this over here, 6 1/3, 0. So see if you can come up with an equation about that. So this is hours, this is feet. After 6 1/3 hours, what's happened? The statue is melted, because 0 feet tall, you're not going to write that. That doesn't make, I mean, it makes sense, but we don't say that. Oh, it's 0 feet tall. You'd say after 6 1/3 hours, the statue has completely melted. So after 6 1/3 hours, and don't change that to a decimal because it goes on forever. If you write 6.3, that is not the same thing as 6 1/3. So after 6 1/3 hours, the statue has melted. And we should really write completely. Wow, I'm really squeezing it in there, aren't I? So after 6 1/3 hours, the statue has melted completely. So now we know where the graph starts. This is how much it was at time 0. And we also know where the graph stops, because once the statue melts, that's the end of the graph. So this is the beginning point of the graph. This is the end point on the graph. So we definitely need to turn over and write those points on the next page. So we got the first two. So now let's write 0, 19, 6 1/3, 0. And then lots of times students are like, well, how do I find that other point? Well, you have the equation. So use the equation. So from the prior page, this was our equation. So pick any x that isn't listed, and we know this is the start. And we know this is where it stops, because once the statue melts, obviously, it's done. So we need to pick any x we want in between those two. So should we pick 2? 2 is easy, right? Because you should fill out the table, whatever table they give you. So this means put t in as 2. And you could have picked 2 or 3 or 5. You could have picked any of those. Okay? I just picked 2 just because, I don't know. T is 2. So I say h of 2 equals -3 times 2, because this means replace all t's with 2, plus 19. So h of 2 is -6 plus 19. What is that, 13? So now I have 5 points to put on the graph. And like I said, you could have put 6 in, or you could have put 5 in, or you could have put 3 in. It doesn't matter. We'd all get the same line. Okay, make a table for this graph, and we're probably going to have to finish it in the next video because I see we just have a minute left, and graph this problem. So first we have to label the x-axis. So let's draw these in and label. So we know from the other side that x is t, and it stands for number of hours. So let's put t here to show what variable it is, and write number of hours. So we always have to have our axes labeled before we can start drawing. And the x is always the horizontal axis, and the y is always the vertical. And we'll finish this next.